Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today let's talk about the famous novelist James Joyce. James Joyce, 1882-1941. Born in 1882 in Radga, a suburb of Dublin, Ireland. Parents John Stanislaw Joyce, a civil servant and a talented singer, and Mary Jane Murray. James Joyce grew up in Catholic middle-class Irish family, which profoundly influenced his worldview and literary themes. His childhood was marked by financial instability after his father's alcoholism, and a financial mismanagement led to family's hardship. He was educated at a Wood College, a Jesuit boarding school, and later at a Belvedere College. James Joyce attended University College Dublin, where he studied modern languages and literature. His early exposure to Irish nationalism, Catholic dogma, and classical literature deeply shaped his intellectual and artistic development. James Joyce developed a lifelong ambivalence toward Ireland, both loving and criticizing his homeland. James Joyce left Ireland permanently in 1904, never to live there again, though Dublin remained the focus of his work. He settled in several European cities over his life: Trieste, which was then part of Austria-Hungary, then Zurich, Switzerland, and Paris in France. James Joyce met and began a lifelong relationship with Nora Barnacle in 1904, marrying her in 1931. They had two children, Georgia and Lucia Joyce. He struggled with poor health, particularly severe problems with his eyesight, undergoing multiple surgeries. Financial difficulties plagued much of James Joyce's life, reliant on patrons and friends like Sylvia Beach, owner of Shakespeare and Company bookstore in Paris. Despite living abroad, Joyce's work remained deeply rooted in the social, cultural, and political realities of Dublin. Now let's analyze the works written by James Joyce. Early Poetry and Prose, first work. Chamber Music, 1907. A collection of 36 lyrical poems expressing themes of love and longing. Early experiments with a style show musicality and emotional subtlety. The next work is Dubliners, published 1914. Is a collection of 15 realistic short stories portraying middle-class Dublin life, explores paralysis, epiphany, and the stifling social environment. This work captures moments of personal crisis or revelation in ordinary lives, notably The Dead, which is a story that examines mortality and emotional isolation. Originally faced censorship due to frank content, but eventually became a classic. The next work, that is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, 1916, is a semi-autobiographical novel following Stephen Dedalus, a sensitive Irish youth growing into an artist. Themes include religion, nationalism, family, and the search for identity. Remarked by a pioneering use of stream of consciousness and a symbolism. Represents a break from traditional narrative to a more psychological and subjective storytelling. The next work, that is Exiles, 1918, is a play exploring complex themes of love, betrayal, freedom, and compromise. It reflects James Joyce's personal experiences with relationships and fidelity. Though less celebrated than his novels, this play displays his interest in drama and dialogue. The next book, that is Ulysses, 1922. James Joyce's landmark novel mapping Homer's Odyssey onto a single day in Dublin, June 16, 1904. The book chronicles the experiences of three main characters, Rupert Bloom, Stephen Dedalus, and Molly Bloom. Themes include identity, time, language, Irish nationalism, human consciousness. The experimental techniques include stream of consciousness, interior monologue, puns, allusions, pastiche, etc. The novel style shifts episode by episode, reflecting different literary forms and modes. Initially banned in several countries due to explicit content, later celebrated as a masterpiece. Influential and shaping modernist literature, it is often cited as one of the greatest novels of the 20th century. Inspired the global celebration known as the Bloom's Day, that is on June 16th. The next book, that is The Finnegan's Wake, 1939. The Finnegan's Wake is a complex experimental work written in a multilingual, pun-heavy, dream-like language. The narrative is cyclical, with the themes of history, mythology, dreams, death, and rebirth. One of the most challenging texts in English literature due to its obscure style and dense allusions. It explores the collective unconscious and a fluidity of meaning and identity. While divisive, it is hailed for pushing the boundaries of what literature can be. Now let's talk about the key themes across James Joyce's works. First of all, Epiphany. Epiphany is a sudden moments of insights or clarity experienced by characters. The next is Paralysis. Paralysis, symbolizing the stagnation of Irish society and a personal entrapment. The next theme, Identity and Selfhood. The struggle of characters to define themselves outside of family, religion, and nationalism. Time and memory. Non-linear perceptions of time, the past constantly interwoven with the present. Next theme, language and narrative innovation. Use of stream of consciousness, interior monologue, shifting narrative perspectives, and a linguistic play. Irish culture and politics. Complex engagement with Irish nationalism, colonial history, Catholicism, and urban life. The next theme, alienation and exile. Characters frequently experience isolation, both physical and emotional. Myth and archetypes. Use of mythic structures, especially Homer's Odyssey in Ulysses. It is to give a universal significance to everyday life. Now let's analyze the main literary styles and innovations we can see in James Joyce's works. First of all, we have stream of consciousness technique. James Joyce was a pioneer in depicting the flow of thoughts and sensations. Interior monologue provides intimate access to characters' psychological states. We can also see symbolism and mythic structures. James Joyce used the archetypes to enrich meaning beneath a realistic detail. Experimental language. In Finnegan's Wake, he pushed the linguistic innovation to extremes, creating a hybrid polyglot language. Multiple narrative voices and perspectives. Especially in Ulysses, each episode implies a different literary style. His books dismantle traditional plot and a character in favor of subjective experience and a linguistic complexity. Now let's talk about the influence and legacy of the writer James Joyce. He is considered one of the most influential modernist writers. He transformed the possibilities of the novel in a narrative form. Joyce inspired later writers like Samuel Beckett, William Faulkner, and Thomas Pynchon. Joyce is subject of intense academic scrutiny and various critical approaches, including psychoanalytic, post-colonial, and structuralist readings. Bloom's Day, that is observed on June 16, is celebrated annually worldwide, honoring the day Ulysses takes place. Joyce's work has impacted not only literature but also cultural studies, philosophy, and linguistics. Now let's talk about the personal challenges and final years of James Joyce. James Joyce entered constant eye problems, undergoing over a dozen surgeries. His financial insecurity was a lifelong concern, dependent on patronage. Despite struggles, he remained intensely dedicated to his art. James Joyce's daughter, Lucia, suffered from mental illness, which deeply affected him and his wife, Nora. James Joyce died on January 13, 1941 in Zurich, Switzerland, after surgery for a perforated ulcer. He was buried in a Flanton cemetery in Zurich. Now let's talk about the main works and the themes. First one, Dubliners, 1914. The Dubliners is a collection of 15 short stories depicting the everyday lives of Dublin's middle class, focusing on themes of paralysis, routine, and epiphany. It explores moments of personal crisis that reveal deeper truths about human nature and Irish society. The next work, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, published in 1916, is a semi-autobiographical novel following Stephen Dedalus' journey toward a self-discovery, exploring themes of identity, religion, and nationalism. It portrays the struggle between personal freedom and social constraints. Our next work, Ulysses, 1922, is a modernist novel mapping Homer's Odyssey onto a single day in Dublin, exploring consciousness, identity, and the ordinary events of daily life. It challenges traditional narrative through stream of consciousness and a linguistic experimentation. The next work, Finnegan's Wake, 1939. Finnegan's Wake is an experimental work characterized by dreamlike language and cyclical narrative, exploring themes of history, mythology, and the unconscious mind. It breaks linguistic conventions to depict the fluidity of time and identity. The next work, Chamber Music, 1907, is a collection of lyrical poems focusing on love, desire, and emotional yearning. These poems highlight Joyce's early preoccupation with the musicality and a romantic expression. The next work, that is Exiles, 1918, is a play dealing with love, betrayal, freedom, and the complexities of human relationships. It reflects Joyce's interest in psychological realism and interpersonal conflicts. The next work, that is The Dead, is a story from the Dubliners, 1914. The final story of the collection Dubliners, focusing on themes of mortality, memory, and emotional isolation. It culminates in a powerful epiphany about life and death. The next story is Evelyn. Evelyn is a story from the story collection Dubliners, published in 1914. It is a story about a young woman torn between escape and duty, exploring themes of paralysis and sacrifice. It portrays the emotional paralysis that traps many characters in Joyce's portrayal of Dublin as in the collection Dubliners. The next story, that is Araby from Dubliners, published 1914. Araby is a coming-of-age story centered on a boy's idealized vision of love and a subsequent disillusionment. The themes include innocence, desire, and the harsh realities of life. The next story, that is Ivy Day in the Committee Room, is another story from the Dubliners collection published in 1914. It is a political story examining Irish nationalism, disillusionment, and political inertia. It critiques the paralysis in Irish political life through the conversations of canvassers. The next story is Proteus from Ulysses, 1922. The story, Proteus, is an interior monologue of Stephen Dedalus focusing on perception, consciousness, and the fluid nature of reality. It explores philosophical themes related to knowledge and existence. The next work, that is Scylla and Charybdis. Scylla and Charybdis is a story from the collection Ulysses, 1922. Here we can see Stephen Dedalus discussing Shakespeare and art in the library, reflecting on the themes of literary creation and intellectual identity. It merges classical mythology with the modernist exploration. The next work, that is Circe from Ulysses, 1922. A surreal, hallucinatory episode set in a brothel that explores themes of desire, repression, and identity transmission. It uses a dramatic play script style and hallucination sequences. The next work, that is Telemachus from Ulysses collection, 1922. The opening episode introducing Stephen Dedalus focusing on themes of exile, family, and intellectual search. It sets the tone for the novel's exploration of identity and hope. The next story, that is Penelope. Penelope is from Ulysses, 1922. Molly Bloom's soliloquy closing the novel, celebrating themes of love, sexuality, and female subjectivity. The stream of consciousness style breaks conventional syntax to reveal deep personal thoughts. The next story, that is The Sisters from the Dubliners, 1914, is a story about a boy's encounter with death and the Catholic Church's influence addressing themes of fate, mortality, and guilt. It opens Dubliners with a tone of mystery and introspection. The next work, that is Grace, is from Dubliners, 1914. This work explores themes of redemption, religion, and social hypocrisy through the story of a fallen man's attempt at a reform. It critiques the shallow nature of Irish social rituals. The next work, that is Clay. Clay is from Dubliners, 1914, and it focuses on an old woman's mundane life and lost opportunities, highlighting themes of loneliness, memory, and regret. It subtly explores the quiet tragedy of ordinary existence. The next work, that is Two Gallants from Dubliners, 1914, a story revealing themes of moral corruption and betrayal through the exploits of two Dublin men. It offers a critique of social decay and a personal manipulation. The next story, that is A Painful Case from the collection Dubliners, 1914. And this work depicts a lonely man's emotional isolation and the consequences of his emotional detachment. Themes include alienation, missed connection, and a regret. Repeat.